Welcome back, everybody. We are discussing the topic of "and you shall know," as in you shall know the Lord, living in the age of redemption. And we were just discussing in the previous segment how God told Moses that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew me. That is, yada, they had intimacy, they had a oneness with me, and that experience was as El Shaddai, the all-sufficient one. But they didn't really have that same kind of an experience with me as Yud-He-Vav-He, the one who was, who is, and is to come. And as I was sharing, I believe it's because Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were living in the age of promise, when the promise was given. But they did not live to see the age of the promise kept. They were assured of it, but they didn't live to see it. They died not having received the promises, the writer of Hebrews says. So Moses and that generation, obviously, are the ones who are going to experience it. What God promised Abraham 400 years earlier, they were going to live to see it. And so that distinguishes the two. And that's why I'm going to make the point and argument that when you're living in the age of redemption, then it means that you're living the age where you go from knowing Him just as El Shaddai, or just knowing about Him, still embracing the things that pertain to Egypt, to knowing Him as Yud-He-Vav-He. And that's how Moses and that generation would come to know Him. Now, backtracking just a bit, we began this teaching by reading from the Gospel of John and how Messiah had said that the definition of eternal life is to know the one and true God and to know Yeshua the Messiah, whom the one and true God sent. And that He's the only one who knows the Father, and then those that He reveals the Father to. The world doesn't know Him, He says, but He knows Him, the Son knows Him, and those that He has given to the Son. But in John chapter 17, there's something else that pertains to our topic matter right now, and that is this prayer that Yeshua prays for His disciples. And in verse 20, He says, "I do not pray for these alone, but also for those who will believe in me through their word." In other words, people like you and me living today. So He was praying for us back then. And here's His prayer: that they all may be one, echad, that they will be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you. So He's praying that we will be one, just like the Father and the Son are one, and that they may also be one in us. Not only are we to be one with one another, but collectively we are to be one in the Father and the Son, if you will, yada, to have that intimacy with one another and with the Father, to have that intimacy with the Son, to be one in the spiritual sense that Adam was intimate with Eve. That's how he knew her. That's how close he was to her. And that is what made it possible for there to be life. And so in a spiritual sense, that's how we are to be one with the Father and the Son. We are to be so close and so intimate that we know them. We know everything that He wants to reveal to us about Him. That's how close we get. Now, let me interject this. That doesn't come natural. It's one thing to say it, to express a desire that happened, but it's an entirely different matter when it comes to doing it. Because for us to have that kind of an intimacy of the heart with the Creator means that I have to die, that you have to die, that we have to take up our cross and follow the Messiah, that we have to be willing to say, not my will, but your will be done, that we have to present our bodies as a living sacrifice, that we are not conformed to the world, because remember, the world that does not know the Father creeps in and infects and affects the body. So we have to come near to Him, approach Him, this all-consuming fire, that we as a living sacrifice may be consumed, and that it is no longer I who live, but Messiah who lives in me. And so His will is expressed in me and through me. That's how we are to be one. And we could go off into the fact that this entails the whole idea of you love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and strength, and another like unto it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. All of those things express this, self-denial. saying no, when it doesn't happen the way you think, how you think, when you think, nevertheless, He is Yud-He-Vav-He. And His will is to be done. And through dying to ourselves, this is how we truly come to know that He is the one who was, who is, and who is to come. And so now I want to go back to Exodus 5 for just a moment and just kind of solidify some thoughts here. Once again, the distinction between the age of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the age of Moses and the Exodus generation is that one, the former was the age of promise, but the latter was the age of redemption. And so then it could be argued that the age of redemption are the ones who will know Him as Yud-He-Vav-He. Let's kind of underscore the point. In Exodus 6, the Creator says in verse 6, "Therefore say to the children of Israel, I am Yud-He-Vav-He, I am the Lord. I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rescue you from their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians." And so it's when He does these things that they truly know Him as Yud-He-Vav-He. Now, a couple of thoughts occur to me here. Once more, if it's then that you shall know that I am the Lord, that means that prior to that, you really didn't know me as the Lord, which goes back to what He tells them, the elders of Israel in Ezekiel 20. I made myself known to you. I told you, put away the abominations which are before your eyes. Don't defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am Yud-He-Vav-He. I am the Lord your God. He doesn't have to say that if they really knew Him. And so it's after He does these things, as He expressed to Moses, I'm going to bring you out from under the captivity of the Egyptians. I'm going to redeem you with an outstretched arm. I'm going to call you to myself as my own people. Then you shall know that I am the Lord. When I do these things. Let's put it this way. For Him to redeem, that means that He has to ransom. That means that there's somebody that feels that they have a claim on you. In this case, it was Pharaoh. And so because Pharaoh feels he has a legitimate claim, I don't know the Lord, I'm not going to let His people go, I'm going to hold on to them, the Creator has to ransom His people. He has to redeem them. Every one of us understand that concept when it comes to being slaves to sin. That we were once in sin, we were slaves to sin, and so then we had to be redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. We had to be ransomed by the blood of the Lamb. And so I know that everyone understands the idea of, as it relates to that. So then, we have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. However, I would add to that, we are being redeemed as well. Because right now, we are still in corruptible bodies. We're still in these mortal bodies. And it has not yet been revealed what we shall be, but when we see Him, we shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. That's when mortal puts on immortality, corruption puts on incorruption. So that's what I mean, that we are being redeemed as well. As we die to the old man, that the new creation may thrive and prosper until that day, which then leads us to this thought. That even though we have been redeemed, are being redeemed, we will be redeemed. And those who are redeemed are the ones who know Him intimately, Yada, as Yud-He-Vav-He, the one who was, the one who is, the one who is to come. Also, we see in these passages that we just read, those who are going to be redeemed, those who are going to know Him very intimately as Yahweh, are redeemed collectively. What I mean by that is, you and I all have experiences and testimonies that we could share about how God has brought us through this situation or out of that trouble. We all have those stories. But can we collectively say that He has redeemed us from the burdens of the Egyptians? And I think the answer to that is right now, no. But that's what he said he was going to do, because this is a pattern that we're reading about. Remember what Paul said to those who are living at the end of the age. This is a pattern for what's going to happen in the future. So here's what I'm getting at. If he's going to redeem us from the burdens of the Egyptians, then there has to be the burdens of the Egyptians. If he is going to bring us out and rescue us from their bondage, then there has to be a bondage to rescue us from. And if you're tracking along with me, then you understand what this is getting at. I don't think there's anybody who would deny that things in the world are changing daily, and the things that we see upon the horizon are very ominous, even a little scary. But I believe that it is a necessary element if we're living in the age of redemption. In other words, if you're living in the age of redemption, then you're going to see that there are going to be troubles, there are going to be trials, there are going to be tribulations, there's going to be bondage, there's going to be tyranny, there's going to be all these things the children of Israel experienced way back then, when in the future we come to know and understand that we're living in the age of redemption. Now with that, I want to go to the book of Luke and read another very familiar portion of Scripture I know that you're familiar with. And let's see if we can get over there. Luke chapter 21, and Messiah speaks, and he says this, beginning in verse 25. He says, "And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring." Let me pose this observation. If there's signs in the sun, moon, and stars, if there is distress on the earth among the nations, if they're perplexed, and if the sea and the waves are roaring, that would suggest a very ominous and threatening time. By the way, there have been signs in the sun, moon, and stars. There is distress among the nations. They're perplexed. Just consider what's going on just in the Middle East. All of these things going on, the sea and the waves roaring, the tsunamis, the earthquakes, all these different things are happening, and that's very important. It goes on to say in verse 26, "Men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming upon the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken." So there's all kinds of ominous things going on. And then Yeshua says in verse 27, "Now when then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory." In verse 28, he says, "Now when these things begin to happen," not after they have and they're past, but when they begin to happen. And so would it be fair to say that already we have seen signs in the sun, moon, and stars, distress on the nations, perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, etc. If we've already seen these things, they have begun to happen. And Messiah very explicitly says that when you see these things begin to happen, we are to look up, lift up your heads. Why? Because your redemption is at hand, or your redemption draws near. It's close. It's at hand. In other words, when you see these things begin to happen, like you and I are seeing them happen, I believe, then we are to know that we are living in the age of redemption. And based on the pattern that we see back in the book of Exodus, if you're living in the age of redemption, if you're living in the time when God is preparing to gather all of His people together, then you're not just going to know Him as El Shaddai, but you're going to know Him as Yud He Vav He. You're going to have that oneness, that closeness, that intimacy with Him as Yud He Vav He. But now, it also means that there's a lot of trouble going on around you. There's a lot of things going on in the heavens, things going on the earth, among the nations, all these ominous things that if we were to fix our gaze upon them, if we were to focus on those things all the time, if we were to focus upon the tyranny and the burdens of the Egyptians, and by the way, whether you're aware of this or not, you should know this, that metaphorically speaking, God's people live in Egypt. We're living in Egypt right now. And so we shouldn't be surprised to see that there is a Pharaoh who's rising up, and I say that not to pertain to any one person, but just a mindset, a way of thinking that is rising up that recognizes or at least believes that God's people are the problem and that they're a threat and that they need to be neutralized and they need to be segregated and they need to be suppressed and oppressed and they need to be, and this is what it's leading to, they need to be in chains, they need to be bound. Their limits have to be set for these people because they're such a threat. And I believe that you don't have to look very far in this day and time to see that that is exactly what has happened. So, if that is, then that's a sure marker that we're living in the age of redemption. When we're seeing all these things swirling around us, we should know, according to what Messiah says, that we're living in the age of redemption. And so then, should we fix our eyes on all of the problems and the scenarios and the conspiracy theories and the black helicopters and the, all these different things, should we be enamored with those things? Should we be focused on those things so much that we forget the admonition of the Lord who said, look up, lift up your head, your redemption's at hand. Know that these things are a sign that you are living in the age of redemption. So I shouldn't be mesmerized by all the things that are going on. I should take note of them. I should recognize them. I should, I believe, properly interpret them. But the most proper interpretation of that is to, when I see these things begin to happen, get my eyes off of those things and get my eyes on the one who has power over all of those things, because I'm living in the age of redemption, which now takes us back to this thought, and you shall know that I am the Lord. You will know, not just know about me, but you're going to know me, because only the one who was, is, and who is to come can deliver you from all these things that are coming upon the earth. Man, political parties, political philosophies, entertainers are not going to be able to deliver you. They're not going to be able to redeem you. The only thing they're going to do is suck all your attention away from the fact that you're living in the age of redemption. You need to focus on me. And to focus on me means to draw near to me. And to draw near to me means to come into a oneness with me, to know me. Because I don't want to be one of those that say, I prophesied in your name. I cast out devils in your name. I did all these wonderful things in your name. And to hear him say, but I didn't know you. So now, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some of the things that happened back in the book of Exodus, in the age of the Exodus, which is a pattern for today. We're going to begin to look at those different things and see how it maybe connects with some of the things that are going on in our world today. But we're going to go, first of all, to Exodus chapter 7. And in chapter 7, beginning in verse 1, it says, So the Lord said to Moses, See, I have made you as a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and Aaron your brother shall tell Pharaoh to send the children of Israel out of the land. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh will not heed you, so that I may lay my hand on Egypt and bring my armies and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand on Egypt and bring out the children of Israel from among them. All right, so there's a couple of things here I want to address. And let's start with what we just read. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. Remember what Pharaoh had said. I don't know the Lord. I don't know Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. I don't recognize him. I don't recognize his authority. Therefore, I will make my laws superior to his. I'm not going to let Israel go. So because Pharaoh says, I don't know the Lord, the Creator, through the plagues, introduces himself to Pharaoh. And as he introduces himself to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians, he brings judgment against all their gods, where they feel authority lies. And so God is going to show them that this isn't a God, that's not a God, they have no authority. And finally it ends with Pharaoh himself, who is cast into the sea, because remember, Pharaoh is deemed to be a god by the Egyptians. His word is law, and he defies the creator of the universe. And so he will be judged ultimately himself. So God says, you will know that I am the Lord. So not only are his people going to know that he's the Lord because they live in the age of redemption, but the world who has denied him, and the world who has scoffed at him and mocked him and derided his laws and his authority, in the end, they shall know that he is the Lord. But there's something else here. That when he multiplies Pharaoh's heart, he says, I will multiply my signs and wonders. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we do need to acknowledge that because they were living in the age of redemption, and because God said he is going to multiply his signs and wonders, then I have to conclude that in the age of redemption, and Messiah suggested that you and I are living in that age and time, what we will see is God multiplying his signs and wonders. And I think that's very, very important. Now, I know that there are signs and wonders that appear throughout all the world, and especially among those peoples who are oppressed and who are living under tyranny, who live in poverty. And I believe and I know that there are signs and wonders that happen all around the world. But I would tend to believe that among God's people here in America particularly, signs and wonders are not so prevalent. And that's just my opinion. I'm not saying they don't happen. I'm just saying that they're not so prevalent. And there's lots of reasons that I believe that we have that situation. Number one, I believe that we live in a culture where people pursue signs and wonders. In other words, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. But we are told that signs and wonders follow after them that believe. So rather than pursuing those things, we're supposed to be pursuing him. And as we pursue him, keeping our focus on him, then these things follow us. That goes back to knowing him as opposed to knowing about him. Those who want to know about him are pursuing the signs and wonders. But those who want to know him, the signs and wonders follow after them that believe. And so, according to his own testimony here, when we're living in the age of redemption and people are coming to know him as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, he will multiply his signs and his wonders. And I tend to believe that this is one of the ways that he attracts the attention of the Egyptians, so to speak. Or let's put it this way. We could make the argument that one of the main reasons that the world doesn't know him is because those who are living here, who claim to know him, aren't the best representation of him. Let me rephrase that. If the world is to know him, that's our job, by the way, to make him known, then it's imperative that we first know him truly. That we're not giving the world a bad representation or an unfaithful representation of who and what he is. I guess what I'm trying to say is, maybe the Egyptians didn't know him in that day and time because his own people only knew about him. And if that was true then perhaps there's some strain of truth for our day too, that maybe the world that castigates and disdains him today does so vigorously because, by and large, his people today, they know about him, but they don't really know him. And so if they truly know him and he multiplies his signs and wonders, then might it be that there are others out there in the world who will come to know him as well. I hope you're following me on this, because our main mandate is to be that city set upon a hill which cannot be hidden. We're supposed to be the ones who are the light shining in the midst of the darkness. And why? So that those who are in darkness might see that light. We are a chosen generation, Peter said, this royal priesthood, that we are to show forth the praises of him who's called us out of darkness into his marvelous light. And the inference to that would be that as we are called out of darkness into his light, and we are projecting that light, or reflecting his light, then there are others who are in darkness who will come to know him. But if that light has been diminished, to the point that the world has infected and affected the body, that we do not present ourselves as light, that we do not present ourselves as that city set upon a hill, then how can we expect the world to know Him the way He desires that they do? And remember, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes on Him should not perish but have everlasting life. And so then, all of this is to bring it back to the fact that it's really our responsibility, if we're living in the age of redemption, and obviously I believe we are, it's our responsibility to make sure that others know that we're living in the age of redemption. And the surest way to do that is to know Him, to go beyond just knowing about Him to knowing Him, to go beyond just singing about Him to singing to Him, to go beyond just a worship experience to worshiping Him. You know, we live in the restoration of all things. We've talked about this in times past. And one thing that occurred to me a few years back is it has to be more than returning to God's ways. It has to be more than returning to God's Sabbaths and His feasts and His dietary laws and all these things, all of which are important, all of which are part of what we're talking about. But the most important thing is that we return to Him, that our heart is after Him. We do these things, we don't do the things that we're not supposed to because we know Him. Let's pause there. We'll come back and continue with our teaching.